My name is Meshaunia Vaughn, and I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. And I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl on October 19th, 2020. I don't know. I mean, at this point, I just don't do too much. I've been chilling. We hang out with the family. And that's been fun. Just kind of shifting gears on what our everyday life looks like. So a lot of times it's like just getting back to the reality of working while having a child at home. I work as a field coordinator for a healthcare workers union, so at $11.99. So I work on the training fund side. So pretty much, essentially, before pandemic, I was out in the field a lot, visiting nursing homes and hospitals and working with union members to build their education and like use the education benefit. But now, post-pandemic, or I don't know, during the pandemic, we are pretty much working from home. I went back to work 2 days a week this week or last week, so that's been interesting. Just trying to figure out new life. Actually, my pregnancy, it was weird because it was pretty perfect. I found out I was pregnant like a couple of weeks before everything hit with COVID. So, I worked for about maybe a month and a half, 2 months, and then we were shut down by the time I was like 2.5 months. So I was in the house the entire time, figuring out ways to like walk around, get out the house, but it was good. I mean, no issues. That baby was easy on me, and that's why I'm nervous for the second time. So actually, like, as soon as I found out I was pregnant, I knew that I didn't want my current GYN, just because of the experiences I had with her. Like, I already knew I had issues with like fibroids, and I just didn't like how she handled me with it. So I was like, I don't want to be dealing with her for pregnancy and fibroids. So I searched for a black doctor purposely, and I found one out of GBMC. And GBMC was the closest hospital to me. Now, granted, I have heard things, because that is one of my hospitals that I work with, like on a professional side. So I've heard a few things about just like their management style and like how they treat employees sometimes, but like as far as birthing, it's a good hospital. So I found a black doctor out of GBMC. Actually, I really liked my doctor. Again, it was weird getting to know her. Her name is Dr. Craig. So it was weird getting to know Dr. Craig during the pandemic because the appointments are shortened a little bit. It's all masked up. So I never even really got to see her face. Like, we didn't see each other's faces. But she would always stand like in the corner of the room. And so it was weird, but I liked her because somehow I still felt a connection with her, even with all of that. And even like my child's father, my partner, felt the same way because he would be on FaceTime. But we felt like we were able, as busy as she was, she answered questions. She didn't rush you through the appointments. And so I really liked her. My child's father was able to go to the ultrasound appointments, but he never was able to go to any of the prenatal appointments. No, it was weird because I feel like I spent so much time Googling and looking up everything on what to expect when it was time to give birth. And then I remember talking, like I would talk to my friends and they would say their water never broke, and others it did break, but it wasn't an experience, whatever. So the day I went into labor, it was weird because I didn't have a feeling, but I felt a sense of urgency, but it wasn't, I didn't tie it to like today is the day I'm going to give birth, but it was just kind of like my bag isn't finished being packed and I need to go to Marshall's to get slippers. And Josh is like, do you need to get the slippers? Do you have to get the slippers today, kind of thing? And I'm like, yes, I need to get the slippers, walking slow as possible through Marshall's. We went to visit our friends who like forced me to eat. And it was just weird because I wasn't going to, they ordered like pizza or something. I wasn't going to eat that food. I'm like, give it to the babies. And they're like, no, eat. I'm so glad I did. Like, thank God I ate, because we went over there, went back home, took a nap. I got up, used the bathroom, laid back down so I could finish my nap. And I swear it felt like Anara, that's my baby's name, was like knocking on my stomach. Like, I felt like 3 knocks, and then all of a sudden, like, clearly my water is breaking right now. Like, this has to be what it is. So I like shuffle to to the bathroom, and I'm FaceTime. I think I FaceTime one of my friends, or I called my mother. Then I tried to FaceTime one of my friends, like just to make sure I was not crazy. And my mother's like, call the doctor. So I called the doctor, who stayed calm as possible. Like, and that was just her MO. Like, asked me about all my symptoms, told me to go into the hospital. I wake Josh up, and he's funny because he's like, I mean, he did good though. Like, I kind of imagined that he would be running in circles when I said my water broke. But no, he did really good. And like, we both like, I'm like, should I take a shower? He's like, yeah, I mean, I guess you can. I don't feel like a baby is slipping out right now. So I take a shower. I literally like make myself some oatmeal because I heard you can't eat, and I was not going through that. That was not even going to be a thing because I didn't know how long I was going to be in there. Ate some oatmeal. We went to the hospital. Of course, I sit my hospital bag like right next to the door, and I'm like, Josh, don't forget my hospital bag. And we get to the hospital, and I have no bag. But my mom, who was determined, I mean, they told us from the beginning that it would only be one person allowed in the hospital, okay, the entire time. But my mom didn't matter. So she's like, I'm on my way to the hospital. And I'm telling her it's no point because you can't come up until after the baby is born. But I'm like, all right, well, if you want to come over here anyway, can you grab my bag out of the house? So she does that. First of all, we get to the hospital, and GBMC is just weird in general with the whole setup, like where labor delivery is versus like the ER, and then where they tell you to park. So where we parked was on the other side of the hospital, it seemed. But we later found out there was an easier way to get. But whatever, we park on the entire other side, and as I'm walking over, like I get up to the ER person, and she's like, oh, labor and delivery's over there. But I'm sitting there clearly in labor, and she just tells me to walk to the other side of the hospital. So I'm like trying to wobble over, but I was never really in a lot of pain. So I feel like even from the beginning of getting to the hospital, nobody really treated me like I was in pain, like this was an urgent situation. But we get to labor and delivery. The lady, the receptionist, super duper nice, but again, talks my ear off as if I am not, like, currently water is coming out like at a constant rate and I can't do anything about it. Okay, so yeah, so they check me in. I have to go in the back by myself, and Josh has to wait until after I am checked in. I get there, and I tell them from the very beginning that, all right, I don't want an epidural, but I know that there is a pain med that you can give me, like up until a certain point where it can at least help ease me through it or get me to the close to the end as possible. So they're all like, okay. So they get me all set up and they check me, and I believe I was about 4 centimeters when I got there. When they hooked me up to the machine, so they put me on, but they noticed immediately that like every time I had a contraction, my daughter's heart rate would dip. Oh, but I'm like, okay, you know, does that mean anything in particular? And they're like, no, I guess they just want to watch it. But again, like, even I was 4 centimeters, and they will ask me if I was having contractions. I guess clearly I was, because I was 4 centimeters, but I never quite felt it. Like, to this day, I don't think I can, until it got to the very end, like, I don't think I can describe exactly what a contraction feels like, which is strange. But yeah, so it takes about 40 minutes of that process, 30 minutes of that process, before they say Josh can come back, and they get ready to wheel me to a room. Whole time my mom's out in the waiting room, and they're telling her that she cannot even wait in the waiting room, so she's out there fussing, and Josh is trying to handle that situation and handle my situation, despite the fact, again, I told her several times, I prepped her for this. But so we get upstairs. Thank you. So we get to the room, and at this point, I guess I didn't say the time, so it was in the evening. So I probably went to the hospital around 8:30, 9ish, and we got to the room maybe about 10:30 or so. And yeah, I mean, the team was okay. Like, from the jump, the first nurse I had, she got in there. When I got in the bed, she was trying to like pull the left side rail up of the bed, and like she couldn't get it, and she was like, it must be broken. So I'm like, okay. So the whole time I'm sitting there, no armrest on this side, but one on the right. But yeah, no. So there was no exchange after that. Like as far as asking about my level of comfort in the bed, but I made do. Had a little tray there. And really, the night was a blur, but also smooth. Like I remember feeling contractions. I would say once I hit about 5 centimeters, but I was able to sort of push through those. Like I would fall asleep in between, so I knew it wasn't super duper painful, but painful enough where I couldn't sleep. So I would doze off for 10 minutes and then contraction hit, wake up. So that was pretty much the night. And the nurses, every time they came in, I asked about the pain med, and they told me I still had to wait. I had to wait because of the contractions causing the heart rate to dip. So okay, so they put a monitor inside instead of just doing the one that checks the baby from the outside. So I had to put a monitor inside, and then they also had to put in a tube. I don't know what it's called, but because I started losing water so fast without going into labor, without like getting ready to push, essentially, they had to put water back in. So like the entire time, it was just like I was just in the bed. Like I couldn't walk around. I couldn't do anything to help ease the pain. But they came in, moved me from side to side, and I would say about like 4 or 5 a.m. they started getting sicker. Like they're like, all right, girl, like you ain't doing this fast enough. My doctor came in about 7 in the morning, and a new nurse also came in who I absolutely love. Like I don't even remember the first girl's name. Okay, but they were, and that was another thing. Yeah, and the nurse would say, like the nurse who couldn't get my bed rail up, just like said smart stuff. Like, not somebody just saying things. So she comes in the middle of the night, and at this point, Josh finally goes to sleep. And she's like, he's a lot of help, huh? And it's like, ma'am, first of all, know exactly. Know your place. Like, she just wasn't helpful at all. And first of all, yes. And like, I would hate to say it, but it made a difference. That I would say all of the nurses I had were white. Until 7 a.m. hit. And she was actually, I think, the new nurse that came in was Indian. I think she said she was Indian. And my doctor came in. So she came in about 7 a.m. just to check in and everything, see how I was doing. Left out. I probably was about maybe about 7, pushing 7 centimeters. So yeah. Every nurse that came in there, like anybody who switched, it was probably like 2 or 3 different people, and I mentioned the pain med. By the time I asked again, I'm like, is anybody gonna check on that? And she's like, oh, like you're too far along now. She was saying that I was too close to, because I think I was about 6.5 centimeters, and she said at this point I was too close to giving birth to get it, to receive it, because I guess certain opioids would, I guess travel to the baby. So by the time the baby comes out, they'll still be able to feel the opioid and all that stuff. So I couldn't get it. At that point, they did offer the epidural every time though, which is interesting, which I never quite understood. Like, okay, like, so what, but y'all worried about her heart rate dipping with that pain med, but like with the epidural, is that not a concern? Why is it not a concern? Like, if that's the case. But, and I still, to this day, I feel like the entire time she was in my stomach, if you touched her, she would like jump and like move and all. I'm like, she just don't like the contraction. She wants the contraction to get up, like it's squeezing her, okay? She didn't like it, like her heart rate is dipping. But it was never where they had to rush in. Like they certainly didn't treat it like it was an emergency, just emergency enough not to give me any pain meds. So they asked me for if I wanted epidural. I remember the first thing my doctor said when she came in though was like, do you have cramps? Like when you have a period, do you have cramps? And I'm like, yeah, but at some point, I would say probably like a year or so before getting pregnant, I think I stopped taking pain medication for when I got cramps and just sort of pushed through it, because I was taking like 4 or 5 ibuprofen at a time. And I was like, this can't be healthy. I think you just need to find other ways to not do it. So I guess I just handle pain pretty well, which is not something you should say when you go into the hospital. Lord knows, because they will carry that thing. And then it's kind of hard to backtrack on that. Like, okay, it hurts now. And they're like, you look fine. I'm not fine. It hurts. So, yeah, so they offer the epidural. But I think my doctor, and I do appreciate her because she never really pushed the epidural. I would say when I hit about 8 centimeters, I was like, like, so y'all say y'all can do epidural. This is the epidural. Let's bring that conversation back up. So the pain is like really starting to kick in now. So Josh is panicking because he's like, she wants the epidural. Like, she needs some pain meds, because once I say I need it, he's like, okay, she needs it. But my doctor, I could tell that she knew I could just push through it, but she's not going to say like, no, I'm not giving you an epidural. And also, at this point, like, it's just going to drag everything out. This labor could go for another hour or another 6 if they stop everything and do the epidural. So she tells me that she's going to give me little drips of Pitocin at a time so that I could push, like, get these contractions going, because it was going really, really slow. So I would say by the time 8:30, maybe 9 a.m. or so hit, when I say my doctor, like, literally stood in the room, like, just stood in the middle of the room, watched the machine, the contraction machine. Later on, it made a bigger difference. But, like, from the time my doctor, I would say she settled in around, like, 8:30 in the morning. And, like, she came in and literally just, like, stood in the room and stayed. She stayed in the room the entire time, like, from that point until the time I delivered. But she stared at the contraction machine and, like, would count me down. Like, she would tell me when the contraction was coming, like, it's getting ready to happen, and I'm like, okay. And she would count me down from the contraction. And she was really good with that. And oddly enough, it helped, because probably for some that would have irritated them, but it helped. And I also had the different nurse. Her name was Ruby, by the way. Like, I won't forget that, because those contractions, like, really started to build up. Like, I do remember Ruby really reminding me to breathe and, like, count, and I'm, like, looking her in the face and, like, trying to breathe. But at this point, I was just trying to rip the rail off. Ruby was the best. Okay. And, like, I remember Josh was on the phone. I don't know exactly what he was saying. I could tell he was, like, getting nervous, because he saw it was getting close to being time to happen, and he was on the phone with my mom. Yeah, so he handed me the phone, and I remember her saying, like, you know, you're doing good, you're doing a good job. But, like, then a contraction hit, and I just, like, set the phone down. I think, or I gave it to Judge. I don't know, but I was screaming. Okay, it was a thing. By 10 centimeters, I can't say that I did not feel anything, because it felt like a burning sensation, like somebody lit my butt on fire. That's what it felt like, literally. But they counted down, and they're like, okay, like, when I hit 10 centimeters, my doctor literally was like, it's at 10! Like, and she got all excited. And because it took forever to, like, get to 10. They kept trying to get a Pitocin, but oh my God. Like, when she said they needed those contractions to be, like, 2 minutes apart, I thought I was going to die. So I'm like, okay, like, how much longer do we have? And she's like, you know, you just got to push. It could be an hour. Like, it could be 15 minutes. It could be, like, several hours of pushing. I said, oh, that's not going to happen. Like, it's not what you said. I need to push. Okay. So I hit 10 centimeters in between those 2-minute contractions. Like, all I know, they started moving so fast. They already had the room set up. But Ruby literally walked around my bed, pulled up the same side rail that 12 hours earlier the white nurse said was broken and could not be fixed. Pulled it up, set it right up, told me to grab. Like, she didn't even know that was a thing. But I said, okay. And that actually registered later in life. So they told Josh to grab a leg, which he didn't. He was not prepared to grab legs. He was like, me? So grab a leg, give him instructions on how to do it. Literally, like, they're like, just give it all you got. And when she told me it could be several hours of pushing, this was not gonna happen. So, like, I pushed with everything in me. Like, I pushed, and they were like, I don't even know, but I can't remember the yell. Like, if the head, like, sort of popped out, or they said at this point I had, like, so much water, like, going back into my uterus that my body had like built a new sac. So yes, and it was weird. But like, so the first thing came out was like the sac that was generating from the water that was being put back in to my uterus. That's the thing, apparently. Never went back to revisit that. But so they like explained this to me and I'm like, okay, whatever. So, but at this point when that came out, they could see her head. So they get like super excited. And I didn't believe them. So I'm looking at Josh like, is she really like about, like, did I really like push that hard? And they're like, yeah, you did. So second push, she's literally halfway out. And it's funny because Dr. Craig had told me before I started pushing, like, this was going to happen. You're going to push once. I'm going to make sure there's no cord wrapped around the head, the neck or whatever. And then like all of these steps or whatever that was going to come between that and the next push. I pushed the second time and she's like literally halfway out. And the third time I push, she shoots out and they like throw her on my chest. Like it was literally, I'm pretty sure it was 3 pushes and it was less than 10 minutes of pushing. And yeah, they set her on my chest and I was so confused. I was like, is this my baby? Because I guess I didn't expect it to happen that fast. And she felt like a little jelly roll because it was just like, she was still like all covered and stuff. So, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that part is weird because it was painful, but the pushing definitely wasn't more painful than those contractions toward the end. My God. But then you think back on it and it's kind of like, and you know that it was very, very painful, but at the same time, it's almost like it disappears in your mind of how painful it was. It's weird. It's like a weird juxtaposition, but yeah. So they stitched me up because I did tear, and I started to like wince or whatever when she was stitching me up, and I was like, "Girl, you just popped out a baby." I literally said that out loud, and then I just held still, let her do her thing, and I watched as they cleaned my baby off, and I could see her over on a little heater. And I'm like, Judge, rub her head, mold her head. Because it shot out like a little cone. And I was like, mold her head. But she was over there getting her stuff together. And it's funny. And I laughed too because like Judge at first was adamant about not cutting the umbilical cord. I think he thought he was going to be a lot more squeamish than he actually was. But like when it came down to it, he was in there like, man, I don't know what he saw. I have no idea what he saw. And I hope he doesn't have like nightmares about it to this day. But I mean, down to, and this might even be TMI, you might even ask all of that. But like for most of the night, I couldn't pee. And they were trying to get me to use the bathroom, so they just like left me on a pee pad, and they were just like, well, whenever you pee, just pee. So I don't know if I was peeing or not because they were putting in water the entire time, so I don't know what was happening. But yeah, so yeah, she came out. She didn't have any issues. I didn't have any issues. It was really a blessing, like overall, despite all of that. And it was after talking to Ruby and she was helping me to the bathroom and everything. She told me that she was a midwife in India for like 20 years before coming to America. And I was like, makes a lot of sense. So I get it. Totally get why people would want to get like midwives and doulas and stuff, because that energy was so much different than the other nurses. It was crazy. Like, I don't even know if I could have pushed her, especially with not having my mom there. It was perfect having her there. So, yeah. But right before I got pregnant, my fibroids were probably about like, I have two. One is like hanging off of the uterus, and one is like, I guess like half in, half out of the uterus. And they were about maybe 5 centimeters when I got pregnant. And by the time I gave birth, the biggest one was 12 centimeters. But from up until the very last appointment, like my doctor was aware of them, and she's like, well, at this point, we're going to plan to have a vaginal birth experience. Like, she never planned for a C-section. She's like, if it comes down to it, you know, she talked to me about what it would look like if that had to happen. But the hope was always that the fibroid will move out of the way when the baby comes because of where it was positioned. And it did, because at first, I think when she was checking me at first, pushing, and the baby, she did move the fibroid out of the way. So, Yeah, so they never really gave me issues. I think the only thing was that I just looked bigger because they thought I was gonna have a bigger baby than I did. Even though I don't think I think I carried well. Like I didn't gain a whole lot of weight, probably about 25, 30 pounds. But I carried pretty well, and the fibroids didn't really cause me too many issues. I think in the beginning there was some bleeding, which made me nervous, but after that, we did not have to get COVID tests. We had to. I think we had to wear a mask. I don't know. They didn't press the mask issue because I know that I definitely had a mask on for most of the night, but I also don't know where that mask ended. Like I can't tell you when I lost it. I think it was somewhere between 8 centimeters and 10. But I had a mask on at first, and then I did not. Josh, I know from the beginning, like excited wasn't even the word. Like he was very much ready for this, and we both were. Like we would talk about having kids and all that other stuff, but I think still when we found out we were having a baby, it obviously set in. It was really real. Like he was ready to tell everybody, but me, I wasn't in denial. That's not the word. I don't know. I guess I was nervous because again, I Google everything and like every story that I hear. I'm like, what if that happens to me? So I'm like, all right, well, let's wait to like tell people about the pregnancy. And he's like, why? Like he's ready to tell everybody. I think he had probably texted 4 people before I said like let's wait, but he was just kind of looking at me like, hey, we can wait, I guess. But yeah, no, I mean he was great. Like I could tell he got into go mode. Like he wanted to buy stuff. He was ready to see bassinets and all that. And I'm like, you don't want to wait? And he's like, wait for what? So we kind of went back and forth about that. And I realized, I'm like, all right, this is his excited process, his nervous process, his all of that. So we both kind of, I think, handled it differently. But overall, just was really excited. Even though he couldn't come inside of the doctor's appointments, he literally waited in the car. So he would come with me and he would just be in the car on FaceTime on the doctor's appointments. He was at all the ultrasound appointments, didn't know what he was looking at. But then they tried to point like, that's the arm. And he's like, yup, like he's trying to explain. But no, he was definitely great. Even like knowing my doctor and like trying to get to know her and like really be a part of the process. Yeah, like I felt very much supported throughout the entire time. After I gave birth, like so after they got me settled into the postpartum room, I was able, I think it was 2 guests at one person at a time. So at first for the birth, you were only allowed 1 person, and that person could come and go as they please, but it could only be that person. They had to like leave their ID and all that. But after I gave birth, I think they upped it to 3. But again, they couldn't be at the same time. Like it could swap out. So my mom came and Josh left. I would say probably when we were at the room. When we were at the room for about an hour or so, and he switched out because he had to go shower and take care of the cat and all that stuff, and it just also rest up because he was up too. And my mom was able to come, and then later that night my dad came, but my mother did not want to leave. And also she got into an argument with one of those nurses, like one of the postpartum nurses, because then it was the same, like pretty much she was very much similar to the first nurse I had, white girl that knew it all and knew nothing at the same time. Like she came in, was trying to tell my mother that she was distracting me from napping because she was on the phone. Meanwhile, I was napping just fine. Yeah, just not minding their business, which I really thought was interesting. Like I guess it's a fine line between caring for the patient and, you know, making sure the patient is good. Like I get that people have stressful experiences with family when they give birth and stuff like that, but don't do too much. So I did try to breastfeed, so I like the entire time at hospital. So I had to stay 3 days. Wait, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Yeah, I was in there for 3 days, or like 2.5 days, because they wanted to make sure I got the hang of breastfeeding. But it was hard. Like she latched immediately, which I guess is semi-normal. But like so she latched immediately, but I never really felt like she was getting a lot of milk. But they told me as long as she didn't lose more than 10% of her body weight, then it was fine. But like, so on the last day, so we went on a Monday, so on Wednesday, they were like, okay, she only lost 9%, so we're good to go. And I'm like, like, are you sure? And somebody did come in. Like, I talked to 2 people, 2 different consultants before leaving, and they helped me. They gave me like the nipple shield and all these things to try to help get the milk going. But I never really felt like I produced that much. So I tried when I got home, but I would say the day after I got home, we started giving her a supplement of Enfamil. So I would still put her on the breast, but I feel like the more I did it and I felt like she wasn't getting it, I would try to pump and nothing would come out, the more like self-conscious and like insecure I got about it. So then it just sort of stretched out more and more. Like, I'm like, all right, like I just put it on when I could, but I would try to pump more regularly. And I did that for like 2 months. And I had friends, like, those are my consultants. But, like, honestly, I never called. After I left the hospital, I did not call, like, a professional lactation consultant. But I literally, like, one of my best friends came over and was, like, grabbing my boob and was just like, you just got to get it. And when they did it, it worked. Like, I had 2 different friends squeeze on my breast during this process. But, yeah. So, I mean, I feel like, honestly, that was, like, the best consultation that I could have had anyway. Because first of all, the 2 people who were showing me also had big boobs. I did not need some little lady who ain't know me with no breasts. Like, they were like, you put that, girl, you gotta turn that pump up. And they like put it up on 10. And like, so I was getting stuff. So I mean, granted, I still never like produced a whole lot, but whatever I could give my baby, I did. And I remember like she was about 2 months old, and at this point, by 2 months, I almost given up. But it was still like a little supply left. But she had gotten a cold. And like when that happened, I was putting her on my boob like every 5 minutes. Like, we're going to get whatever's in here today, ma'am. I don't know if it's going to do anything. But I was pumping and trying to put her on there. And I will say she hasn't been sick since then. So, knock on wood. Please knock on wood. Because that was a horrible experience. But hopefully in the future, I would definitely try breastfeeding again. But it is definitely an emotional experience. So postpartum is hard enough. So when you feel like already like first baby, this isn't going well, it's like, great, like this is the first thing I'm supposed to do as a mom and this ain't working. That's not a good start for postpartum. But I had enough support and all that where it didn't make my experience super negative at all. I mean, and even like taking advice, because you know everybody say like take the help. That's what everybody says like the entire time. And at first I was like, I'm fine, but Josh would look at me like, did you call your mom today? Did you tell her to come over today? Or because he was still working. I was on leave for 4 months, but his leave was he worked midweek, so Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, he would work still from home, but working. So on Tuesdays and Thursdays, my mom would come over and like help out with me and the baby, which was very helpful. And I did take a little coaching even for that to happen. Like, I'm fine, you don't have to come over. But thank God she did. I would say the biggest takeaway is really just managing expectations, because 9 months is a long time. And that's like to be developing a baby, like a lot of time to be thinking and like researching and Googling and birthing plan, which I agree with the birth. Like, I think having a birthing plan is a good idea and necessary, but like you really have to be very vocal if you want that birthing plan to really be put in action. Because when the moment happens, when it's time to give birth, it's time to give birth. Like, they're not asking you pretty much that much. They're not really asking you a lot of questions. So if you didn't already tell them what was happening, you better tell them. So I would say, you know, just manage what you expect to happen. Like, just enjoy the experience. Like, enjoy it. Listen to your body. Don't feel like you're a failure if like your plans don't necessarily go how you thought it was gonna go. The piece of advice I would give would just be what people would say to me, and like that's taking the support and like being open about the support that you need. And even if you don't know what you need, let people tell you. Let people tell you what you need. Let them come over. If they gotta squeeze your breast to make the milk come out, then let them do it. All of that can go out the window, all the pride and everything else, because having a baby, a newborn for the first time is hard. So I would say second time around, I would not hesitate to have people come over. Overall, like, it was a great experience. Once you get past, people said that the first few months, that newborn stage was a blur. I did not believe it. I'm like, this is the slowest time of my entire life. It is nothing fast about this at all, but it does go by quickly. And like, I would have to remember that going into the next baby, because even though it's hard as crap, it does go by fast, and it's a very joyous time. I love it. Like, honestly, being a mom, I don't know. I guess I always said, like, of course I want to have children and all that stuff, but it is so weird looking at a little baby and like knowing that you produced this child and like, this baby. I don't know. It's like an immediate, well, I won't say it's an immediate connection, because I don't want to make that blanket statement, because it's not like that for everybody. You know what I mean? But I feel like, for our little family, we're just so connected, and she's just like me and Joshua. And it's funny because even him, I'm like, why do you get the maternal instinct? Because he's just as like instinctual when it comes to her as I am, maybe even more sometimes. And it's really a blessing. Like, I don't know, it's really a good time. Like, we have a good time in the house, and we're so excited because she's older now, and we're like planning things to do, and we can take her out and just get her used to being out in the world and having a good time, because it was still COVID time and she was newborn. So when we first took her out, she was looking around like, what are these monsters around me that are people with masks on? But no, it's been awesome. Like, I don't know, I can't even explain it.